Hello, my name is David Goldberg. I'm Scottish, I'm a law professor, and I'm also a Council of Europe expert on the topic of access to information. I realize that I'm speaking to people whose job it is to be asked to disclose information. And this is something that may cause you a professional headache or a professional difficulty. Of course, the bottom line is that here in Ukraine, you have a law from 2011 on the law of access to information. And so it's a legal obligation which people who steward or possess information which is requested by citizens, it's a duty that they have to disclose it where appropriate. And I think where appropriate is the important phrase, because under, I think it's Article 6 of the law, whilst there are a number of protected interests, which you can read up, of course, in the law itself, you have to subject the question as to whether or not only does the information fall into those protected interests, but also would the disclosure cause harm, maybe even serious harm, if it was disclosed. And you know, even if you decide that, there is still what is called the public interest test override, where you have to decide that even if there might be harm, the harm caused by the disclosing of the information is actually outweighed by the harm in not disclosing it. So it's a delicate balance which people who steward information have to make in order to decide whether or not to disclose it. And whilst I'm saying that information officers are stewards or possessors of the information, I think it's also quite important to remember that, you know, at the end of the day, that's your professional job with your professional hat on. But you are also a citizen of Ukraine. You are also a parent who is interested in the educational system. You're somebody who, like all of us, are, of course, interested in the health system and the health care in the country. You move around the country, so you'll be interested in the transport infrastructure. You are someone who breathes the air, so obviously you are affected by the environment and therefore the environmental impact of projects and processes and so forth. In other words, even though it may be your day job to disclose or not, and I'm not saying all information ought to be disclosed, there will be reasonable decisions which would mean that you wouldn't have to disclose the information, which you will learn about during this course. Even if that's your day job, you may also, as a citizen of Ukraine, want to use the law yourself to access or to request disclosure of information which is of interest to you in your life. So I would love you to not think of yourself as an information officer which somehow disowns the information and you are asked for it by civil society or citizens to whom you are somehow separate. You're not. At one level, you're all equally in this boat together. And may I also just say that I used the word owning the information. It would also be right to point out that information cannot be owned. Information cannot be owned. Owning something means that if I have it, you don't have it. But the point about information is that we can all have the same information without anybody else being deprived of it. So in that sense, no one can own the information. And in fact, as a public servant, you are simply, as I said before, the steward or the possessor of that. And it is therefore not yours to decide whether to hold or not. One also has to remember that your decisions may be appealed. They could be appealed to the Ukraine Commissioner on Human Rights, the Ombudsman, the Information Ombudsman. It could also go to a court hearing. So what you decide to do with it at the first instance, as we say, may be only one step of the ladder. But finally, let me say that although this may seem to you to be a daunting and perhaps even a challenging task, you are actually part of the privileged generation who is taking part in one of the greatest governance revolutions of all time. For millennia, the default position has been the information is secret, I own it, who are you, and why do you want it? That was very much the attitude of mind in the old days. But all that has changed now with the introduction of access to information laws, of which, by the way, there are something like 113 in the world. We in Scotland have one which covers Scottish public authorities. So don't feel that you are particularly badly done by here in Ukraine. You're actually part of a large global community. In fact, 89% of the world's population live in countries which are under an access to information law. So you're actually part not merely of the present, but of the future. You're privileged, I would suggest, to take part in a great governance revolution where the default position has gone from who are you and why do you want to know it to this is a right that someone is exercising. They are legally entitled to request this information, which can only be refused under very specific and narrowly drawn exceptions. And as I said before, and let me conclude by saying, it could be you. It could be you asking for this information when you are not wearing your hat as a professional information officer, and that is really the attitude I would like you to think about your task in. How would I feel if I submitted the request for this information? How would I like it to be treated? May I wish you the best of luck with your course. I'm sure you will all be successful and gain this valuable certificate, which you can get at the end, the successful end of the completion of the course. And I'm sure that you will have both a personally and a professionally enriching time.